Hello and welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you here in our kind of pre-first episode of our podcast, Auctorum. My name is Isabelle. I'm the founder and co-host.
And I'm Oliver. I'm the co-host.
There aren't usually times where we can talk about the podcast and not just immerse ourselves in the content of each episode. This podcast is also a project. We put a lot of thought into it. We're trying to do something with this idea, and so we wanted to take some time to sort of deconstruct that with you if you're interested and go over that, talk about who we are and what we're doing. And if you want to go ahead and skip this and get to the content episode, that's totally fine too. Just to give a general overview, this podcast is an obscure literature review podcast. So we're going to be going over different scientific topics, different existential questions by exploring published scientific literature. But what we're hoping to do that's different, so it's not boring, it's not just going over literature. We're trying to transcend all of these questions and ideas and fit in these scientific discoveries and themes into this bigger, broader question of life and what it means to be living. We're hoping that this attracts an intellectual conversation, but not a conversation that's limited to intellectuals or those in academia. We're hoping that this can be a learning tool, an exciting discovery tool for people who maybe aren't professionally in the field of science but love learning new facts and new things about the world. And then also, like I said, we want to take it a step further. I mean, I'm a curious person. I know that people listening are curious, and I think we all have this thirst for truth. And truth is everything. It's bigger than science, it's bigger than facts. It encompasses everything. If something is true, it's true everywhere. And so we just want to take that idea, build this intellectual playground. That's a word I've been throwing around to help me get myself in the mindset of what we're doing, and just sort of explore.
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. The way that I kind of framed it for myself before was the idea of using the literature as a launching point. So it's not to say that the concept here is about focusing and narrowing in on the research, but it is about taking research that raises a question, challenges something that, intrigues you in some way and using that to go in whatever direction it takes us, not limiting it to a very narrow academic space.
Exactly. And that's also why I like the visual and sort of the metaphor of an intellectual playground. Whenever you were talking about the academic literature building this foundation, to me, that's the playground equipment. And we're just trying to do something with it. We're trying to bounce ideas off of each other, dig deeper into these questions about life that we have, and also ways that other people have synthesized their experience of life, what they have to say about truth, the ways that they've seen truth and felt truth. And so I'm really excited about it. But before we get into the context, let's introduce ourselves and who we are.
My name is Oliver. As Isabelle said, we both met each other in college. We were in the same undergraduate botanical research lab. I love thinking about that in hindsight because it does make a little bit more sense for me since I have gone down a more botanical career path. But the way I always think about it is that we were kind of similarly going insane at the same time. And for whatever reasons, it kind of both led us to this dark little lab full of herbarium cabinets where we just started talking about this kind of stuff. So that's kind of like the context in which we met. That kind of aligned with my experience at the time too. I've continued down that vein. I've been doing plant ecology, botanical research, working at a botanical garden for the past 3 years, including undergraduate, like 4+, however you want to frame that. Anything from horticulture to working at a nursery to working in a plant tissue culture lab. I've just kind of been doing a little bit of everything in the field. And I think what has, it's taken me all sorts of really weird directions. But when I really look at what's made me want to do that, I think all of it points back to ecology as a discipline that's both grounding and intellectually stimulating at the same time. Of whenever you're looking at this ecosystem, you can go into this very high-minded place of just break it down concept by concept, paper by paper, just to try and figure out what's going on here. But still, at the end of the day, while you're still just getting stuck in your head, you're standing in the middle of a forest, just sitting with the fact that you're in this huge living ecosystem organism that's much bigger than you. I think that's what always kind of drew me to it and what's brought me to it up till this point. But again, just to like transcend, that prompt of itself, I think it is, it's larger than just what ecology can provide. I think as a whole, for me, again, it goes back to that desire to see the world as bigger than it is, going for something that is intellectually rich, stimulating, that does make the world bigger, but not getting so abstract or cerebral to the point that you're not even talking about the world anymore. So I like
Yeah.
that very, very grounded, yet very strongly intellectual perspective approach. I think just to life. I think it's a good way to live.
Yeah, and I think also to preface, we went to the University of the South in Sewanee,
Free
which the
plug.
campus, yeah, we forgot to mention that. But the campus itself, which was actually voted to be the most beautiful campus in the United States, I'm
Yeah,
pretty
just
sure
like,
last week.
yeah.
Again, probably because it truly is.
Right, the year before that, they were like in top 10, so
Yeah,
they're getting more beautiful.
exactly. But it definitely earns the title of number one. The campus is 14,000 acres. But all that to say, in this environment rich with all of these plants, we did, like Oliver said, find ourselves together in this herbarium lab, botanical lab, and we were looking at it from different perspectives. And that's really cool. And I want to dive into that. But one thing that I want to add too about what you were saying in your interest in ecology. Part of the reason why we are really excited about starting this podcast is we're both, on paper, we're scientists in different ways. I'm a research scientist, mainly in the medical field, and Oliver is a horticulturalist. Propagation, seed culturing, things like that. Really interesting things that I'm going to leave it to him to talk about because he could do it way better than me. But at the same time, we have this other side to us that is craving something deeper than just laboratory work and data and numbers and figures. Because as I was trying to say before, I don't know if I verbalized it well, but science, whenever you hear that word, you think of biology, physics, these subjects. But really, what it is it's observing whatever you're looking at, whether it be an environment, an organism, observing something and trying to extract some truth from that. And we have a process of doing that. We have a scientific method. But really, at the core of people who love science, it's this desire to extract some sort of truth. And so that can appear to be work that has to do in the subjects of biology, physics, etc., but it can show up in deeper ways. And that was one thing I think that Oliver and I had in common a lot, and that's one thing that we want to bring to this podcast. It's the desire to, we keep using the word transcend, but really tie in both the art of science with truth in general. And so what you were saying with ecology, like, yes, you're looking at an ecosystem, but at the same time, it's the story of a community. Like with plants, it's going to be a community of how these plants interact with each other and interact with the environment. But I also know you as a person, and one of the things that draw you to it and one of your interests has to do with communities.
Mm.
And this has led us to have many intersectional, specific ideas that we get very interested in. Like, I know for you, urban ecology was a big thing. And that in itself is so interesting because it almost seems like it's contradicting itself. But all that to say, there's this double sided vision to the love of science, and it transcends just STEM. It also has to do with this desire for truth, and it dips into the humanities a lot. Would you
Hmm.
agree that we're sort of both humanities and STEM type people, and that sort of led us to what this podcast is?
Absolutely. I mean, the way I think about that for myself, you and other people I interact with who are just in the same kind of space, I think about it of just having multiple feet and multiple doors, refusing to kind of go all the way through in one direction or anything, and just saying that there is something very important about wedging yourself in the space in between that you can't really see if you just say, I'm doing X, Y, or Z, or just saying, I'm committing to this path and forgetting about everything else. I think
Exactly.
that play of it is, yeah, going back to the concept of play, I think is so crucial of just that balance of going deep, close investigation, narrowing on something without at the same time forgetting a broader context. So that ability to kind of go in and out, depth versus breadth, that whole exploration. I think that's the art in of itself that we both really get into.
Yeah. And just to touch on sort of how we were finding ourselves in this similar environment but looking at it from different point of views, like Oliver talked about, his interest is very much in ecology, the movement of plants within a community, the interactions. and also propagation. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, I have never seen someone able to propagate plants. Like, he could take one little shred of a leaf and turn it into this whole vine. It blew my mind. And then from my perspective, my interest in plants, because I love plants, I love botanical science, I've always been interested in it. But for me, it was from a biochemical point of view. It was also from a cultural point of view. My interest has to do with physiology, pathology, so how the body works, the study of diseases, both on a cellular and molecular level, but also on a cultural level. That's a big part of what I do and who I am and how I think. How have cultures decided how to tell if someone is ill or diseased versus healthy? But then historically, the first medicine came from plants. And so for me, it was the interaction between people and plants and looking at them from an individual level, even a biochemical level, rather than taking a step back and doing the ecology of it. So it was two very different things. I also am an artist, and so I really enjoyed botanical illustrations. Whenever I was a research fellow, I conducted a lot of the cultural and artistic interaction that we have with plants.
I started in ecology because it was both intellectually stimulating and grounding. I think I found it at a time where I felt very disgrounded or disconnected in my own life. Again, this was not even post COVID, just like in the middle of COVID, which a lot of people had that common experience of deep isolation, deep disconnect, a whole just questioning or trying to figure out how to connect with any piece of the world around you under like incredibly stressful, isolating circumstances. And that's when ecology and botany really entered my life. And I know for so many people, it was a similar launching point. And then I just kind of went crazy for it, just kept on building on it, just finding more and more avenues to kind of build into it. And there are people who, again, just keep it very strictly just an academic science research level pursuit, who just see it all as just a context in which to kind of justify the existence of papers. Like, oh yeah, I know this plant, I read about it, and that's the beginning and end of their entire relationship. But very quickly, it felt very easy. I mean, I think it was also because we were in the same lab. We were able to have conversations using plants as a unifying language, but going in very, very different directions with it.
Yes.
It was still,
Because, like I said,
yeah.
if something is true, it's true everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about truth in plants, we're also talking about the truth in why we exist and what we're doing on this planet and all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it always makes me sad when people don't see that. Or like whenever I talk to people who are very research driven, what is this really about to you? Why are you doing this? No, I'm just doing this because I think it's a cool concept, and that's the beginning and end of it. It's like, really? You're not seeing anything else that's going on here? And that always devastated me. Because I feel like, again, what you're bringing up of just plants as medicine, how that plugs into culture. I mean, like, ecology, I think it's just the study of relationship of living things. I think ecology is like the ultimate expression of so many other disciplines. And that's just what makes it so inherently interdisciplinary. It's inherently just kind of going all over the place. To me, it's very easy to take that into the humanities, bring it in a direction that, people normally might not feel inclined to bring it in.
I also want to ask for the people watching, could you share a little bit about where you are in life and sort of the history up until where you are now?
Mm-hmm. I could do that. All right, so just starting with hard facts about my life. Since graduating University of the South, I've been working in the botanical world. I've been hopping around just doing various, technician, seasonal, part-time work. Without a master's, it's very hard to be acknowledged by the academic community or just the research community. So I'm just kind of in this ephemeral space until I figure out what the next concrete step looks like, if there even is a next concrete step. So currently, I work in a research department at Botanical Garden in 2 of their research labs doing all sorts of little projects, and then at a plant nursery part-time outside of that. And then, just in my own life, growing whatever I can, playing around. I've been getting a little bit into flower arrangement. I don't know how far I'm going to go with that, but it is a little bit of a curiosity right now. It's on brand, so might as well. So that's just kind of like where it's taking me. Again, no, it's worth bringing up because I feel like it is taking what has been more historically for me been a harder STEM science and trying to bring it into a more artsy space. So that is a conversation I'm having with myself right now. But I'm also broadening it out a lot too, because again, ecology and botany has been a beautiful launching point to me. This relationship of grounding and intellectual stimulation has been deeply fantastic for me. But I also know this isn't the only way to get that in my life. So I'm also in a place where I am broadening out, trying to see what else could this look like? How else could this desire be met? Maybe I'm about to realize I was meant to be a podcaster my whole life. Maybe this is the best iteration that I can be in. But I'd say I'm in a very questioning broad space, or like letting the world open up in front of me without telling myself what it needs to be.
Yeah, dude, early 20s is weird like that too.
Yeah.
Like, I also hope that people who are listening to this don't just relate to the content of what we're talking about, but also the context. Like, who we are, what you just said about the world of science not really opening up to people unless you have a master's degree or publications or something, that's very real. And I hope that we talk about that more too, talk about the journey of academia. But really quickly, I also want you to touch on the research that you did.
I think the biggest research project, especially if you want to put in this frame of both like research and personal pursuit of truth, the biggest project for me so far, and that has been, the work that I did in South Africa, where I spent about half a year in Kruger National Park, huge megafauna, elephants, giraffes, the whole wazoo, arguably one of the most biodiverse, intact ecosystems in the world, a 4-hour drive from the cradle of humanity, where, like evidence of humanity was first found. So I was just in a little research station right in the middle of that just had a little electric barbed wire fence keeping the elephants away from our little houses, where I was just doing plant ecology research I spent the first 3 months there as part of a study abroad program, but then after that, I was able to do my internship, which was more strongly plant ecology work, working with this mimosoid leguminous shrub that grows in the savanna. I love throwing out mimosoid and leguminous. Those are some good botanical terms there. So I was working with, Dickerstachys cinerea, also known as sicklebush, a mimosoid leguminous shrub of the South African savanna. We were looking at it in 2 instances. In its native ecosystem, where it is, burned down every 2 years and facing constant megafaunal pressure of herbivory being eaten alive, being burned down every 2 years, and then compared that to a private landscape that wasn't under the same regime of disturbance, wasn't being burned down, some megafauna, but not nearly as much, herbivory. And then we were just trying to figure out how are they growing differently in these 2 places? Because in the native environment, if you ever see those like iconic photos of paintings of the savanna, the sun is setting and there's like a single tree in the distance. Historically, or in its native ecosystem, it has that relationship. You can look across the whole landscape and you'll see maybe a clump of 2 or 3, but otherwise that's it. You would go outside of that, and it just forms this monoculture thicket of itself, where it's just this tree and nothing else for like as far as you can see, and it's 10 feet tall. And in other parts of the world, it's also an invasive plant. The second it's not being burned down or eaten alive, it just grows like crazy. So the whole point of the project was just trying to figure out what's going on here, why does it look like this over there, why does it look like that over there, and what is causing this difference? Like, how is it going from 3 to 100 in a matter of years? Is it producing seeds? Is it cloning itself? What's going on? The whole time, we were just asking the question of how is it perpetuating itself? What is it doing in response to this disturbance? I could talk about research findings, my honors thesis, how that got accepted, numbers, That's part of it, but I never gave a shit about that. That's what justified me being there. That's how I was able to make it work. But in terms of what I got out of it, I was just looking at this plant that, in its native ecosystem, is constantly being beaten back, eaten alive, being burned down, but it lives its life around that. And also, we're going to do a whole episode on clonal plant ecology individuality. I spent that whole summer just trying to just draw the lines of what is an individual, how many stems does it have, where does its roots end, and where do the roots of another tree begin. I wasn't even trying to ask any high concept questions. I was just trying to figure out what one single plant was. And that completely broke my mind. So I think that was, the more you look at it, the more closely you look, the more it falls apart. And by the end of the summer, I was just like, I have no idea what this even is anymore. It's just an organism that's growing in ways that I used to think I understood.
Yeah, so many themes too. Like, I remember the idea of disturbance and resilience was
Mm-hmm.
something that was really on your mind during that time as well. And I think that that's something that we'll really dive into in the first episode as well: biological instinct, wilderness, and learning. So that'll be really interesting. We'll talk about that there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But speaking of talking about things and the way that we talk about things, one of the, honestly, not one of, the main way that Oliver and I became friends was we were in this research fellowship together. There was one summer where we were both on campus, and our school is very small, in the middle of nowhere, very isolated. And so we decided to explore plants and explore cultural use of plants through having tea parties where we would get different teas, we would brew them, and we would sit and discuss, talk about how it tasted, and then talk about anything that was on our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think about this podcast as a continuation of that. Maybe I'll have a cup of tea whenever I record, but I just think that that's cool because that
Mm-hmm.
is a big part of, like what our friendship was and how it started. I'm happy that this is how it's continuing.
Yeah.
But now it's my turn. I get to talk about myself now. I ended up graduating in 3 years, just trying to get out of there. I just worked a lot and I love school, genuinely. Quite the school nerd. And so anytime there was an opportunity to take an extra class or do a summer class, I'm just genuinely interested in it. So I always took that opportunity, and at the end of the day, I kind of looked at both the money and the credits, and I was like, you know what? I can do this. So I ended up graduating in 3 years, so we graduated at the same time. After that, I took a year off as well, sort of that weird ephemeral time that I'm sure a lot of people, hopefully people listening to this, understand that that's totally normal and
I think
okay.
I don't think enough people do.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much what most people do, and it's not a failure. It's actually a really beautiful time.
Mm-hmm.
So just making that point for people listening. So I took a year off. I moved back home, which I'm comfortable saying I live in New Orleans. So I moved back home and I took that year because I was interested in the medical world. Although I knew that I didn't necessarily want to be the conventional doctor type of thing. I wasn't a conventional pre-med student or anything like that. I knew that I've always been interested in the topic of medicine. I will also mention that whenever I graduated, I had my degree in biology, and then I also earned a degree double major in environmental arts and humanities. And so that's also really related to what this podcast is at the end of the day. It's thinking about the relationship that communities and people have with their environment, however that might arise, whether that be through studying the artwork that people do that's inspired by the environment. I was looking at it from more of an anthropological point of view. And for me, the environment, that connection had to do a lot with biological learning, and mainly biological learning of health and disease, and then what people do whenever they decide if someone is sick, how they learned from their environment to get to the point where they could intervene, come up with therapies, and whatnot. And so that really was fueling my mindset. I knew that I didn't want to be like a traditional doctor, but I was interested in the world of healing, of communities. My thesis for undergrad for my environmental arts and humanities degree was a very personal one that explored these ideas. I am Cajun. It's an ethnic group in southern Louisiana. And so my project was about Cajun communities, fragmentation, and how fragmentation of these environments changed the ways that we connect with one another in our community. And therefore, you can also see the effects in medical treatments that Cajun people had. So that was really interesting. Anyway, so during my year after undergrad, I worked in a hospital as a medical assistant. I wanted to see what that world looked like. Realized that I didn't like it personally. It wasn't for me because I'm the type of person where I just had so many questions. Like, I would go through the day, I would work with patients, work with doctors, also working with a lot of insurance. But I just kept thinking to myself, I feel like we can do more. I feel like there's more to do here. I feel like we know more. There's more options on the table. I just have so many questions about how these people are sick, what more we can do. And that curiosity is really, that is the seed of letting you know that you need to go into research for those listening as well. If you're the type of person where you are highly curious, cannot stop thinking about questions about the world and wanting to find the answers, yeah, you're a researcher. And so I pivoted. And during that time, I was also taking a la carte classes at a local university for organic chemistry. That was another thing I realized in undergrad. I didn't take enough chemistry and I really loved it. Like what Oliver was saying, biology is really applied chemistry. And so it allowed me to understand more a deeper truth about life, a deeper truth about the world. So that was cool. So then I pivoted and I decided to also, I've been a waitress forever as well. So during this time I was working as a waitress. I've always done that. But I applied to a master's program because I knew that I wanted to do research professionally at that point. I knew the topics that I was interested in, and I just wanted a little bit more background education. I wanted some more lab experience. And so in May of this year, that's what, a few months ago, like 2 months ago or something, I got my master's degree in pathology. Woo! And it was specifically cellular and molecular pathology. It wasn't a pathologist assistant type of program. It was more looking at what's actually happening on a cellular level during sickness. And so that opened up a lot of really big questions for me. Now, I currently am a medical research specialist and I work at a research facility, and that's what I'm doing now. But during my journey of this time, I also realized that whenever I was having all of these questions and all of this curiosity, the desire to understand more about the world, whenever I was a little baby, undergrad, I wasn't sure where to look. Um,
Mm.
it was up until like my senior-ish year, because mine was like shortened and combined. It was really my senior year whenever I realized, and I really got it ingrained in me, that I was comfortable with looking towards scientific journals for sources. Not to say that I didn't do that before, but I actually got to a point where I would look into scientific journals even if I wasn't like writing a paper. It got to the point for me where it was just a really interesting learning tool. And as I progressed through my master's degree, I got more experience from the perspective of the people who are writing the journals. So that was sort of my first introduction into science academia. And that gave me a deeper understanding of, okay, whenever I'm reading this, I'm actually connecting to it as well. But even on the anthropology side of my studies, I mean, there are publications there too. It's not just science. And part of this podcast project, because it is a bigger, broader project for the public as well, it does more than just, you know, interest Oliver and I in conversation. We have a motive, and that motive is to provide this oasis and to teach people where to go and what to do with all of this thirst and curiosity that we have about the world.
So as we were talking, I was trying to think of the unifying language of truth of what both connected us, what are we looking for, what are we trying to make happen. I think the big one that comes to mind to me is the word interconnectivity. We're looking for the interconnectivity of the world, different disciplines, taking case studies, tying them together to say, oh, it's all interrelated, and the world is much bigger than any single magnifying lens view of the world. And I like what you're saying about, again, it's trying to stay true to this natural inclination towards conversation we already had, and taking that and saying, oh, it looks like there is a desire, craving, need for this in the world. Again, it feels like academia or a lot of the scientific environment at times has been hostile to curiosity. There's kind of like a right direction to take your questions. And a lot of that is kind of because, like, I think there's this really hard relationship to navigate when there is research or academic precedent of naturally just wherever you are in your journey, you're going to start asking questions that other people have already asked and answered. So the whole initial journey of just trying to keep that curiosity alive when it feels like the whole world has already been figured out, I think is really challenging. And there's not a lot of
Yeah.
people saying, no, there's still a place for like childlike wonder. It's just on a new frontier that you haven't reached yet. So I
Yes.
think just making people realize that is just not a battle, but like a job or like a need in of itself, just to make people realize there still is a place for that curious intellectual need that you're feeling and can't seem to figure out how to plug into the world as it is now.
Yes, exactly. Both for people who might not be in the world of research, trying to teach people the value of curiosity. It's a skill.
Hmm.
It's a skill that needs to be strengthened. And with that, it's also something that because our education system has changed so much in the world, it's also a skill that's being a little bit muted because we have such quick access to technology. And I say technology not just to help you visualize phones and computers and stuff. It really is, technology is something that allows us to do a thing. And because we have technology, it sort of eliminates this desire of workshopping our thoughts, trying to get to a new, better, more efficient way to think about something or to do something. And so, really, the value of curiosity for people who aren't in the field. But I also think, and this is, I feel like, where I am at in life and what I would like to bring into this project. Whenever you're in the world of research, whenever you're deep in it, like PhD students, postdocs, master's students, PIs, all these people, like every day, we're doing these routine lab things, we're looking at the data, we're analyzing it. Sometimes we forget to connect with it, like what you were saying.
Hmm.
Whenever we were talking about your work in South Africa, like I said, during that time, you weren't just thinking about why is this tree persistent in a different way in some areas versus in a different environment? You were also thinking about your own life. What does it mean to be persistent? What does it mean to have disturbance against you as a person? And all of these things, like connecting to what you're doing, because, like I keep saying, whenever we look at one type of truth, the reality is that truth is probably going to be reflected and projected in a different part of life. Sometimes, even whenever I'm studying one cell, I think about how it's like a whole city. How we can look at our cities and look at cells and like think about the technology that cells have and apply it to whole communities. It's like it's play. It's a way to play with your thoughts. And that's what we're trying to build here. We're trying to build this playground to bring joy back to the work that academics are doing, researchers are doing, scientists are doing, and to bring this value of curiosity to people who want to know the world that they're in and the life that they're experiencing.
And I think there's something really phenomenal that you touched on there of just that whole idea of that interdisciplinary play, even if it doesn't look like building it up in a way that can be certified under degree, acknowledged by the academic research community. Just learning how to be able to take that and apply it to your own life is incredibly huge. That was a beautiful reintroduction to my South Africa work because I touched on it before, the whole idea of looking at this plant, how it's able to survive under these extreme conditions. What I was going through at the time of that was incredibly applicable to me was my grandfather's death. That was, I think, a few months after I got back from South Africa. So when I was in that same place of how do I respond to this experience of what it feels like to be eaten alive, being burnt, like actively being burned by something, the greatest model, point of reference, teacher I had to be able to navigate all that was this bush that I just spent a whole, half a year looking at, studying how it was growing and building itself up, responding to, interacting with, active fire, being eaten alive. And that's in like, maybe again in the herbivory episode or the episode where we talk about that more, we can maybe get down to the nitty gritty of how that's possible. But I think the goal really is, or the dream is, for people to see how that's possible, to take something from what feels inapplicable to your own life and be able to see, like, oh, this integrates perfectly.
Yeah, let's develop this skill of being able to rethink, being able to reconceptualize, because it's not just going to help our minds, it's going to help our souls. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to help everything. And I say that in a very objective sense, not talking about a specific religion, not talking about a specific lifestyle, truly the essence that isn't just, your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of, in my experience, one of the things that was challenging for me as a highly curious person is trying to fit myself into the world that exists now. because these thoughts are very intersectional. It's trying to categorize myself in a way that I really struggle with that, thinking about medicine, thinking about disease, about affliction. All of these things, to us, we visualize hospitals and medications and things like that. But since the dawn of time, this was also a highly spiritual question. You could see if someone was afflicted in a way that wasn't just physical. And so it really is, I really hope to transcend, whenever we're bringing in these scientific journals, it's not to bore you. Like, we're not just bringing in facts and being like, oh, these facts were reported. No, it's not that at all. It's bringing in these pieces of literature, which I will tell you as a person who reads like 100 scientific journals a day at work, partly because it's my work, partly because it's my hobby. They're beautiful. Whenever
Mm.
you get into the papers and the literature, it's beautiful language. Because you're also looking at a body of work that was a professional's whole task for like 3 years. And even down to the sentence of what they say, the way that they compose the sentence, it's like the purest light. It's beautiful. And so we're bringing in this literature not just to bring in facts and stuff. Like, we're talking about facts and we're talking about, okay, this is the pathway that we're going to explore this curiosity. But you can use this story that is being reported with this journal or with this publication, and you could talk about all of life with it. And so that's what we're doing in this podcast. That's the goal. The form of each episode will be talking about literature, but it's like talking about life, using the literature and exploring different things, transcending these ideas. And also, one other thing, because if you've listened to this intro episode thus far, you've realized that this is a very multi-dimensional project. We have different goals. There's a lot of different things that we're trying to do with this. But another thing, and I think that this is something that might be on the more me side, because we have different careers, and my career is the academia side of research. It's also appreciating these publications for what they are. A lot of them people skim through to like find the thing that they're looking for, they flag it, they cite it, and it's done. But I also want to acknowledge the beauty in the things that we're going to read and talk about. Because ideally, the things that we're sourcing, these publications that we're looking for, they're highly reputable. But at the same time, they're people who have done this thought process that we're talking about right now. It's bigger than just the project. It has more to do with this whole story of what we're doing here on this planet. And so I also want to bring in a level of appreciation. I do have a goal that, and I'm gonna say this now because it all relies on whether or not this podcast is good. But if this podcast is good and it goes well, I would hope to sort of have a moment where after each episode, I can email and reach out to the scientists and, let them know, hey, this was beautiful. We took some
Mm.
time in this project that we have to appreciate it, to talk about it, to dissect it, to fit it into this bigger story, and thank you. I think that I would hope that that's done more.
We want this to, spark curiosity. We want this to serve as a tool in of itself, educate, teach people a way in which you can take truth found in places you wouldn't expect and apply them to your own life to enrich your own life. And I think another crucial thing too is in looking at, I guess, if you do want to, lack of a better words, the science communication crisis, the public distrust of intellectualism, the whole, however you want to frame what's going on in the world right now. I think so much of that comes from, again, it goes back to the fear of the unknown, the discomfort with uncertainty. And I think we are going in ambitiously saying we want to be able to take a world that has been presented to you as a very small thing and make you realize it's a bigger thing. But the convenience of a small world is easier to explain. So if you make the world too big and you don't have the words or the ability to make sense of it, you are consenting to or entering this unexplained, unknowable, or not yet understood world. And so I think ideally we can bring people into a place where that curiosity is alive, they can make all the connections and realize, oh, I understand what's going on in the world, yay. But in the cases in which, we leave some unopened doors or closed doors where we're not quite sure where to go from here, I think another beautiful skill to learn will be just sitting with the discomfort of unknowing and almost kind of learning how to celebrate it. Of just
Yeah.
taking what could be intimidating, scary, also pretty bold to assume that we will be able to break open the world enough to make people go, I don't understand anymore. But, like, I don't know, maybe we'll have some people freaking out in the comments. But assuming we do anything even close to that, I think a long way building the skill of almost celebrating that uncertainty of just, oh, wow, the world is so much bigger than I thought it was. And if you can get past what's scary about that, you get back to closer to that childlike state of, wow, the world is big.
Yeah, and that really is the value of curiosity. That's the gift that it brings to our lives. And I agree with what you're saying. And one thing that I want to touch on too, and we'll probably touch on this in the first episode because it has a lot to do with the way that we conduct science. Curiosity can also be weaponized, and we
Mm.
see that now as well. I will say from my side, from a research side, it's incredibly important to be curious, and part of that curiosity means not trusting everything that you hear right as you hear it. It's that process of having enough skills in the background to be able to determine what is reputable and what is true with your own skills. And just for the people listening, while you listen, we want you to know it's important to be curious about something, and it's important not to trust something right away. And that's part of what we're trying to teach with this process of going over this literature as well. It's not just the amazing things that we find, but it's how we find it. If you listen and if you read something on your own and you're like, I don't know how I feel about this, I'm not going to agree with this 100% yet, that's okay. That's actually good. From a research perspective, that's good. That's a positive thing. But what comes from that is whenever you get there, you also need to have the ability to communicate why you feel that way. You can't just say, oh, I don't like this. No, it's not that. Whenever you go to a defense, a thesis defense, it isn't just someone saying, I don't like it. It's someone saying, are you sure that you did this the right way? Prove to me that you did this the right way. Prove to me that this analysis is sound. Things like that. And that's important. That's a good thing. So please know that science is kind of made up of trust issues in that way. But it's important to have the training, to have the confidence, to have the ability to communicate what about it needs to be reevaluated. And then whenever you do get that response of, oh, well, I did this because blank, and it makes sense, then accept it. So that's part of the process that we're trying to learn here as well. And I don't know, I just thought that that related to the value of curiosity because it's something to be appreciated. And it's something to be respected. And to me, that process of how we trust what is true, that deserves to be respected. Any closing thoughts?
I think that was my attempt at a closing thought, but we just keep on building on it, so.
This is definitely filling a hole for me
Mm.
of stimulating conversations, retraining my brain, and just learning more about the world, learning more
Mm-hmm.
about, the physical world around me, but diving in and scrutinizing what is the experience of life like.
Mm.
And that's pretty amazing. We're so excited to bring you with us on this journey because learning is a journey, and that's what we're doing. Like, we're learning on a big scale, not just a little scale. But I think if you stick with us, if you try a few episodes, I really think that you'll find too that this is going to fill some sort of hole in your life as well. Some sort of desire for truth that I think you have, and I think that we all have. And with that, welcome to Auctorum, the literature review for the obscure scientist. My name is Isabelle Berthelot, your host, with Oliver Hutchens, my co-host. Stay tuned for more.